Susan. Hello and welcome to the Dublin Conversations. Marc, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, Andy. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me as a part of the Dublin conversation. It's quite an honor to be here and always good to see you again. My name is Marc Whitt. I live and work in the state of Kentucky in the United States of America. For nearly 40 years, I have professionally been involved largely in higher education, public relations work. I have also done consulting work for several for-profit and nonprofit corporations and the like, and I'm the author of 2 books. My first one came out a couple of years ago, titled PR Lessons Learned Along the Way. And as of November 1st of 2022, have had my second book released. And it's titled When in Doubt, Make Applesauce: Core Habits of the Masterful Public Relations Professional.
My first question's got to be, where did the inspiration come from the title about making applesauce? What's the story there?
Yeah, yes, I've had several to ask me of that. Well, when I was putting my outline together for this book, I knew that I wanted to write about the core habits of our profession and had it all spelled out with the exception of the title. And so one day I was with my mother, who is 85 years young, going on age 40. And she was asking me how the book was going, and we talked about it a bit. And I said, well, to be honest, it's going well. Research is going well, but for the life of me, I cannot think of a good title for the book. And she said, well, you know what I've always said, when in doubt, make applesauce. And so I had a rather eureka moment when she said that. And she has always, even though she is a fantastic cook and by chance does have a tremendous recipe for applesauce, which finds its way in the very back of this book. I obviously had to include that. But she has always used that as a reference that when we get ourselves so busy and there's so much noise and distraction around us, that for herself, she would typically find her way into the kitchen where it was just between her and making whatever she was while being able to think. And it made me pause to think that this too was very applicable to what I was trying to achieve in this book, that as we cut away all of the layers that can develop on us as professionals and all the noise around us, if we strip everything away, what are the core essential habits for our work? And so, Andy, with that understanding, that's why I came up with 8 core habits that I feature in this book.
Maybe we could explore those as we go through the 5 steps, and certainly the metaphor of the applesauce is very much appropriate for this very conversation, and indeed the wider Dublin conversation mission of let's pause, reflect, and what are the really big issues, what's the real challenges here, and what ways the best way go forward. And really, to begin our conversation, we use this analogy that many people in our communications industry are very much like the early astronomers who developed framework of thinking, but with the flaw that, like the early astronomers having the Earth at the center, people look in the communications industry might see the world through a public relations worldview and advertising, communications, behavior change, and so on. And the idea is that what we can do to step outside those worldviews, to see a bigger picture through what we call the Dublin window. And in doing so, either reframe, repurpose, or indeed even replace with better ideas to enable us to create and sustain a more purposeful communications industry. So let's begin our journey with the 5 steps, Mark, to Dublin. And step 1, is that the idea of confidence being at the center of our universe, in a sense that confidence, not in a sort of commonly used as self-confidence, bravado, but maybe more as in the sense of a reliable expectation of subsequent reality. And we believe there are perhaps at least 5 levels of confidence. So firstly, you need to have a confidence in your perception of reality. Is that effective? Secondly, confidence in your own authentic purpose. Thirdly, you need to have confidence in others. And fourthly, others need to have confidence in you. And fifthly, that others need to have confidence in each other for our society to operate. And identified that actually managing perceptions around your future behaviors is perhaps one of the most critical human functions after breathing, eating, using your senses. And having an authentic purpose and being purposeful makes it easier to create confidence by being more coherent and compelling. And being mindful of some of your core habits. Habit number 1, for example, is an unquestionable character and integrity. I suspect you may have some thoughts on this as being a central issue.
It certainly is. The professional in our work understands the enormous value of living out a personal and professional life that reflects the highest standards of moral conduct and ethical behavior.
Yeah.
I often like to tell PR groups when discussing this topic is the person people see on Saturdays standing in line with their kids at the movie theater, same person making decisions around the boardroom table. The masterful public relations professional is one and the same, or at least should be, Andy, in my opinion. Their behaviors, attitudes, decisions, counsel, and actions must always be consistent. And that's one of the hallmarks of that person who truly does stand out as a model of unquestionable character and integrity.
Can I maybe move to step 2, because I think there's some dimension there that very much strongly links with it. So you may be familiar with what's known in the industry as the PESO model of channels of reaching people. And we're suggesting that if you've identified your authentic purpose, you then need to consider how you socially interact with others. And we've identified what we call 5 open choices that are profoundly more significant than channels. And within that own, I would reading about your different habits, it strikes me that a lot of the qualities in effective social interactions is indeed your character, as Aristotle observed 2,000 years ago, and also in terms of how that character performs and operates. So I tend to find a lot of communications text make an assumption that you are sort of a neutral entity who's seeking to communicate with another, rather than addressing this profound issue about, well, who is this entity interacting? And then a further dimension, which I know is a subject you're very keen on, is about the introduction of behavioral sciences and into public relations and communications practice. There's the introduction of nudge to represent how you influence people by making the choices you like them to do easier, so you can influence people without even communicating, by providing them with easier choices that achieve your goals. So just wondering, Marc, any thoughts there about this step 2, about 5 open choices reflecting the range of choices you have and the different significance between them?
Well, I'll tell you, Andy, you hit on some excellent points. I applaud you for including the social sciences in this model. It is absolutely imperative that we do include for the person who is in my case and in yours, in the field of, in the profession of public relations. I believe that we become even more astute in network, as a networker, in terms of relationship building, when we understand how to truly and genuinely connect with people. And one of the best ways to understand that is obviously through the social sciences, having a good understanding of philosophy, a good understanding of psychology and sociology and so forth. So this to me is just an excellent way to help make us or lead us to become even better, more astute in our work. Another point that you have is talking about being authentic.
Yeah.
And if you will, I want to just say a word here, going back to being an exceptional relationship builder and
Yeah.
networker while building on social sciences. Networking and building relationships with others comes naturally for the masterful public relations professional. They understand, as I've already stated, they understand not only the concepts and the theories, the applications of various communications, way to communicate with people, but they take that from in my opinion, from understanding the social sciences. This relationship builder and networker who is exceptional, this is second nature for them. Nothing is forced or awkward when conversing with such an individual. They understand their audience and surroundings and connect accordingly. They are truly genuine and authentic. And one thing that I would quickly point out that I believe that we have got to get back to, not only in terms of those from the United Kingdom and the United States of America, but I would almost contend worldwide, is that we have got to get back to understanding true, genuine conversation. I'm afraid that in all the noise of everything, we have failed, or we are failing to understand what true, genuine conversation is about. And this is the reason I applaud you for what you're doing here with the Dublin conversation and our discussion today, because we are having genuine conversation to hear one another out. I know we have several opinions that match right up and just, are terrific. But I'm sure too that we would find places where we may differ. And you know
Yeah.
what? That's okay. That's okay. But wherever we differ, when we are having true, genuine, authentic conversation, we listen to each other. We try to gain a greater understanding of who we are and from where we're coming from. And boy, when we do that, true communication happens.
And certainly we'll be moving on to that as a key dimension. Just reflecting on some of the things you said there, and also in your book, I was very pleased that you gave an emphasis on the concept and idea of networking. And certainly, in my view, however, I wrote a book previously on personal communications, and it strikes me that networking is very much like the Cinderella of like marketing and public relations and communications. I suspect one reason is that for many eyes, there's a danger of networking being seen as not working in terms of being social activities. But I just feel that, again, it's a fundamental model and dynamic, whether you do it on a personal level or in like viral method, like word of mouth, as well as strategic. So certainly, I think networking as a part of maybe the own constituency, very much fits in that model, Emma. And you mentioned there about listening, and really that's very much at the heart of the next step. In that this is using a model developed by Professor Gareth Loudon of Imperial College London, of this very delightfully simple of how we connect with other people in the world around us by listening, connect, and doing. And the concept of like what's called the Mobius and strip, where it's a constant loop, a constant dynamic of listen, connect, do, feedback, listen, connect, do. And at the beating heart at the center of this model is the concept of purpose, where the idea being that the more purposeful one is, the more vibrant the creative flow in that dynamic, in that loop. And it really sits within a concept of what's called emergence, that our world is created from emergence from its environment. And also that going back to behavioral science, sociologists, for example, can now establish almost like universal laws of human behavior, one of which is that 2 out of 3 people will help a stranger, but it also means that 1 out of 3 don't. And so really what we recognize is that in your behaviors, they may well be driven by the specific context of a situation, but nonetheless the prevailing instincts of we-led, where your instinct reaction is to respond in the communal common good, and me-led, which is about a more self-centered response. And that actually these two responses could be the foundation stones for a philosophy, could be labeled a public relations approach, characterized by being we-led, and an advertising approach characterized by being me-led. And that there's a need for a new definition that covers a bigger landscape than the existing terms of public relations, advertising, communications. And second, obviously, there's a label for that. We believe there's a bigger universe that goes beyond those existing terms, because it also needs to include not just communications and behavior change, but also purpose, and also critical issue of social cohesion. So a lot to throw at them in terms of listen, connect, do, we-led and me-led, and the need for a bigger framework of thinking and a label for that framework. Any thoughts there, Mark?
Well, our business, when you were talking a little while ago about the model where centuries ago, the earth was seen as being the very center and everything revolved around us. And for those of us in public relations, we need, in my opinion, to view this model that we're not, we don't have everybody rotating around us. Rather, we need to be the ones who are rotating around everyone else and take it from a service mentality. We must be about service. How can we impact lives through the work that we do on behalf of the organization or the business or the agency that we represent? In my opinion, that's really what our brand reputation needs to be about. And as I point out in the book, I said the brand reputation is spelled SERVICE, or service.
Yeah. And I notice, as I say, you've got the concept of the servant leader. And one of the sort of key underpinning philosophies and principles, beliefs of the Dublin Conversations is this one of humility. A lovely concept, what's called humble intelligence. That and if you've got humility, you recognise that there's value in any conversation, from any interaction, and there's always something bigger than yourself there. Yeah. So in terms then of specifics there, Mark, of like the idea of we-led and me-led thinking maybe being potential foundation stones. Any thoughts there?
Well, I said earlier, Andy, that I knew that the longer we went into this program, we would just be cheering each other on, because everything you're saying is exactly where I stand as well. Servant leadership is a personal commitment, a calling, if you will, to place oneself at the back of the line while serving the needs of others first. And in today's world where incivility, rudeness, and me first seem to rule the day, the idea of becoming a servant leader looks rather radical, doesn't it? So that's what we need to be about, servant leadership, where sometimes I'll have friends who will say, well, if you're the PR person, you're always the guy who's in the spotlight. And that's really furthest from the truth. We are the ones who are backstage, who are making sure that the ones that we serve and represent are the ones who are in the spotlight. We are there to help guide and give encouragement, support, direction, a plan of action, and hopefully to help make them successful.
Well, certainly underpinning each of these steps is families of tools. Under step one in our program of 7 tools to support identifying your purpose and character, very much about your social instincts, where we identify that there's purposeful leadership, but also purposeful followership, and that both are critical, that you can't have a tribe of everyone being a leader equally. Each and every one of us, there'll be times where we need to be a leader, and other times we need to be a follower. So some interesting overlapping of thinking there, Mark. And then
Andy, if I could just real quick, I learned this early. I saw it firsthand early in my career. Institution where I was serving at the time, there was a day of the year. This was for a small private university, about 2,000 students enrolled, and each spring the university would have an entire day off, away from classes and all, but they would spend it as a day of repairing buildings, painting, cleaning the campus, raking the lawns, trimming the shrubs and all to make it, planting flowers, making it look really nice. And so everyone came looking forward to the day where we could all work side by side, professors, administrators, students, even some alumni, and a few of the townspeople would come together for this special day. And then at the end of the day, we would have a picnic together and celebrate a day. But the thing that really stood out for me on my very first occasion was, here I was dressed, ready to get completely filthy that day, had my my shovel in hand and ready to go. And as I was going out thinking that I was going to be the one of the first people outside to begin work, there stood the president of the college. He was the first one out there, and he was not there to give orders, to give directions, to tell this group you need to do this, or this group you need to go over there and do this. He was a true servant leader. He was ready to roll up his own sleeves and to get his pant legs a bit dirty along with everybody else. And it was that kind of leadership that people knew that he had what we call oftentimes here in the States having skin in the game, meaning that that he was right there side by side wanting to move us all forward together. And so it was a perfect example to me for servant leadership, one of which we in our work in public relations can certainly learn from.
And so it could be an elaboration there, Mark, on our fourth step, which is using the influence of behavioral science, particularly the work of people like Professor Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize winner, where it recognizes that we're emotionally driven animals. And if you need to socially interact with others, how do you do that? And believe that these sort of 5 key, what are called heuristics, rules of thumb, enable people to effectively socially interact. And we believe actually these frame really any campaign, any strategy, even the very existence of effective social interactions. And the 5 goals are being known and noticed, being liked, and liked is not just effective liking, but being like respected, admired, as well as the paradoxical, you can actively dislike someone, and therefore that creates an emotional engagement. Trusted, front of mind, and being talked about. And just the marvelous story you shared there of the former principal that, as I say, you could see how those actions would tick all those boxes. And also an additional point on this is that the spectrum is that not just positive, there might be times when you may not want to be known, may not want to be liked, and so on. So it's, as I say, it's both a positive and negative dimensions. Just wondering if you think, is there, of these 5 dimensions, is there anything that's missing or anything that's a particular emphasis, or any observation about that, Mark?
Well, the thing that strikes me there is that fits in quite well with being what I refer to as being an effective and strategic communicator.
Yeah.
The public relations professional who is a master at this particular habit takes the complicated and makes it simple for everyday people to understand. They don't speak over others' heads. They don't try to impress. Instead, they talk to and with their audience. As a result, people feel a natural connection with this masterful professional. So the points you laid out right there, I think dovetails quite nicely.
And then really building upon that is the idea that in any social action, there's a need to be regenerative. We need to, through any social interaction, replenish the social fabric of trust, togetherness, and being able to come together to tackle critical challenges. So your university day together maybe a microcosm of the bigger societal issue of how can that be manifest and replicated in everyday activities. And so we've suggest there's a need for some sort of regenerative dimension with a candidate name of regenerative comms. And it goes beyond what, say, an established two-way communication model of looking at listening and engaging and recognizing that actually you've got responsibility and consequences to the wider social dimension, the wider social ecosystem that's critical for enabling us to live together and survive. Any thoughts on this step, Marc?
We must become much, much better at listening. All of us, including the one you're talking to, we all enjoy talking and being heard, don't we? And yet, the most essential communication skill is becoming an exceptional listener. One of the early mistakes that Marc Whitt made when he was a freshly minted PR professional was one of my first, I guess it was about my first job as a director of public relations. And I was asked to put together an extensive, comprehensive public relations plan for the organization. And the president asked me to have it on his desk in 2 weeks' time. I obviously left his office with excitement, ready to tackle the world. And immediately I began seizing on developing a PR plan that would be like none other. And so I put together a plan, and Andy, it was a beautiful plan. It had all the bells and whistles. It had everything that one could possibly want. And so I went and presented it to the people, my coworkers, and the response was just people staring back at me. No one applauded. There wasn't any kind of positive vibe that I was getting. And I left really quite confused. And a friend who was in that meeting, who was very bold, and I appreciate that boldness, came to me and asked me a very important question. Said, Marc, this plan was well written, and it appeared that you had everything in place. But let me ask you, how many of us did you come talk to about ideas? How did you know anything about the organization? Well, I didn't. I mean, I was a brand new employee. I had been there less than a month, had not really taken the time yet to get out and about and listen to people, talk to them, what made their organization special, what were their dreams and aspirations. And boy, I will tell you, Andy, I learned a hard lesson right there that the first step that I should have taken then, thankfully, I learned from that experience, was to first sit down with people and just listen to them. It was so important that we become a sponge for our organization, that we soak in the traditions, the heritage, the mission, the values, all of those aspects before we can launch out with any type of effort, a PR effort, whether it be a campaign or whatever. We first have to sit down and understand the culture of the organization before we begin launching anything. And that was a mistake that I had made early on, and thankfully since learned from a hard lesson.
Yeah. So it seems to me that while some may recognize the significance of listening, what you're maybe suggesting there that perhaps is there a tendency to regard listening as a technical function within a transactional communication, or is there something more profound about the art and craft and quality of listening? There's not just what you're taking in, but who you're listening with, the time, how you're being perceived as listening. Is there a bigger dimension that I suspect you elaborate more in your book there, Marc?
Most certainly, it's the latter, in my opinion. I've noticed, and I'm sure you have too, that you'll sometimes encounter individuals that, as you may be sharing a point of view, you can tell in their mind they're not listening to you. They're in their mind, they're already developing what their response is going to be to whatever you're saying. So we have got to take a step back, and as we're developing and honing our skill to be good listeners, not to be so ready to pounce on the individual who is sharing with us, but to absorb what they are telling us. We may agree with them, we may not agree with them, but either way, we need to allow them the time to be able to fully and completely share before we then come back and give our opinion or our counsel to them. So that's where I stand on that.
And you've described a very significant interpersonal listening. I just wanted any thoughts about what is called an intra, I-N-T-R-A, personal, about listening to your own mind, the voice in your head. Is there any thoughts on that at all, Marc?
Oh, yes. Yes, there are plenty. I believe that we must always be self-aware. And I'm not talking, it goes back to a bit of what you said earlier about confidence. And as I say this is not opposite of being confident. To me, being self-aware builds confidence. We need to do very frequent, consistent self-evaluations of ourselves, to be very honest. If we have a trusted colleague who will be a wonderful mentor, or who can come to us, give us an honest assessment of maybe quirks in our personalities or our character, and hone those. I think that's essential as we do build that confidence that you talked about a few minutes ago, Andy.
Yeah. So going through, having gone the 5 steps, question: do you actually feel more confident about addressing the question, looking ahead to the future? What does better look like? What does a better future look like? How are you feeling now, having gone through these 5 steps?
I am the eternal optimist. And I believe that as long as we are breathing and eating and singing a song, that there's always opportunity to be a better person tomorrow than we are today.
Yeah.
And I think that it is incumbent on those of us who are in public relations that we be our own CEO. What do I mean by that? Chief Encouragement Officer. Chief Encouragement Officer. So that when we see opportunities to help lift others up, we need to take it upon ourselves to be the first to step up, to encourage those around us, to do it in a very genuine way. And so, yeah, I'm very much an optimist, Andy.
It's very much of the ethos of what we're talking about in regenerative, and the idea that you're not just dealing with an immediate transaction, but you're making deposits in the bank of wider goodwill, positivity, and a sense of togetherness and so on. So exactly. We've shared the Dublin Conversations model of the Dublin window. Is there anything, one or more things the Dublin Conversation should be doing different, do you think?
Well, everything that you have outlined for me during our discussion today, I think you're spot on. I would just say continue to keep focused on what you have outlined, and continue the dialogue with professionals such as myself to get their input. And I see some tremendous opportunity from what you're designing.
Very kind. And is there any specific actions we need to be doing to amplify or realize the full potential of our mission?
Oftentimes, and I think we're all guilty for this, that we tend to include those who are much like ourselves, largely because we're very comfortable that way. So I would always try to look to groups, populations that are very diverse, much different than you and I, age groups, backgrounds, cultures, the whole dynamic of different groups that we can talk to. And here again, in terms of applying those sessions of being able to listen and to have dialogue, we grow so much from those opportunities to listen to those who are so unlike us. And as a result, I feel like, and here again, being the optimist, I believe that when we do listen to those who not only are like us, but those who are unlike us, we grow as a people.
I think it's very much the philosophy and ethos of the Dublin Conversation. Marc, thank you so much. I was just finished the recording now. And thank you again so much for joining us at the Dublin Conversations.
Thank you, Andy. This has been terrific.
Thank you so much.